of Full Funnel Live. So today we have episode 99, and today I'm co-hosting this episode with Dr. Jim Kanichirayil, and we're going to share with you guys something that lots of folks recently asked us. So how sales should operate in ABM motion, right? We have lots of discussions about account-based marketing, and quite often I see that one thing is being missed out is this sales part. We talk a lot about different creative tactics of warming up accounts, of reaching out to these accounts, but what is missed is basically how to sync in all of these activities with sales, how to onboard sales, how to make sure that sales follow the same list of accounts and understand the ABM motion and ABM framework. And together with marketing, I'm not saying that helping marketing, right? But together with marketing, generating business opportunities, that's the most important thing. So we've been in contact with Jim for a long time, and when he worked for a previous organization before Circa, we had like a business case. We wanted to work together, but then things changed. But what was great is that Jim took some of our frameworks and approaches and implemented them later. So today we want to share practical use cases of basically how sales team can do account-based marketing and help marketing to grow the ABM motion. So Jim, first of all, thanks a lot for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation. And just to add a little bit of context, I've actually tried this at the previous organization, and I'm actually doing this entire motion that you and Vlad talk about as part of Full Funnel in my current role too. So we have two different use cases that we can talk about and the results from it. And the great thing about it is that both use cases provide a lot of evidence of how this can work. Now, obviously, I'm going to present it from the sales side of it, so I'm not going to know all the ins and outs of marketing orchestration. I'm a sales guy that pretends to know marketing and plays marketer on LinkedIn. So bear with me if I get some of the terminology wrong, but I'm super looking forward to kind of sharing my experience with this, because I think it's freaking gold as far as a seller is concerned.
And as always, guys, if you want to ask any question, feel free, right? You can ask your question live, just raise your hand or type your question in a Zoom chat and I will call you out. So that being said, let's dive deeply and let's present the framework.
Yeah, so we'll get into that in right away, and I want to give a little bit of context in terms of where this started. So obviously, Andre mentioned that I'd connected with them probably a year and a half ago or so, and just started consuming some of their frameworks, listened to a lot of their podcasts and live webinars. I actually first got exposed to them when they did the Full Funnel Summit. So if you have an opportunity to sign up for that the next time it rolls around, definitely do that. But the great thing about all of their content is that the principles can be applied by anybody. So initially, when I started consuming the information, we were using the 1-1-1-10 model, which is what Vlad and Andre talk about a lot. Basically, you have one marketer, one sales rep, an SDR, and you identify 10 accounts or actually one persona and 10 accounts within your ICP. I tweaked that a little bit in the first go around, because the situation that we were dealing with, and this kind of gives you an idea of the comparison of both companies that I've actually driven this through. The situation that I was dealing with in the first company is, there was an existing playbook. I was new in the role. One of the key tasks was to build out the sales organization from a new business development perspective. I looked at the existing playbook. It didn't sound, based on my experience, that it was going to be effective, but I wanted to give it a run anyways. And there was something in the neighborhood of 7,000 to 8,000, outreach points. And typically when I've done that level of volume in any other role, I'm getting significant meeting and conversation activity. So executing their existing playbook, I went through the motions that they had in place and none of it worked. And I knew it didn't work, but I wanted to provide the evidence first. So I had that volume of outreach using their existing playbook, and it didn't generate a single conversation, a single meeting. And I was like, well, I kind of knew it was going to be the case. And it was contrary to how I naturally sell anyways. So this was probably a month worth of outreach that kind of said, okay, well, I need to do something different because this isn't going to work. So what we did is I started watching a lot of the full funnel stuff. And we really pared down what our target prospect ecosystem looks like. And that got us to that 1-1-1-10 model. I actually expanded it out to 20 companies. And what we did is we made the case internally to do a thought leadership led go-to-market motion. And you know, the reason why we went that route, and I think it's pretty obvious for anybody that actually watches or has consumed full funnel stuff previously, the vast majority of your customer landscape or your TAM has no idea who you are. They don't know who you are as a company. They don't care. They don't know who you are as a person. They don't care. And your job as a seller is to build rapport, trust, and credibility at scale and create conversations at scale. And you're not going to do that if you're just using a direct selling motion where you're just saying, hey, Andre, I'm Jim from such and such company. Can you give me 15 minutes of your time? And, you know, we've all seen it in our LinkedIn inboxes. We get messages like that all the time. And our reaction is, who the hell are you? And block. So, you know, that we knew that wasn't working. So we decided to go in that first instance to lead with a series of thought leadership episodes. And I actually, it was one marketer, myself, and basically I played the role of SDR as well, selling into the HR persona. And we basically created conversations, driving a particular series of topics, and then got people in our ecosystem and created a feedback loop from that session to build the relationship. So that motion in that first company, we only did it for 2 weeks. So it was a really narrow run, but that generated 40 new meetings and 20 opportunities. And we used the combination of content led plays and market research plays, and then loop that all into a feedback component that creates a scenario where you're in perpetual discovery. So I want to stop right there and see if Andre's got questions or there's questions from the audience before we move to the second use case and then the rest of the conversation. So hopefully that makes sense as far as the layout of what was the situation in the first instance. But it was a good trial run. I was disappointed that we didn't get to scale that out. But you know, it is what it is. I still got to take the stuff that I learned and implement it on a bigger scale. And we'll get to that in a second.
I will just drop 5 cents about the framework that you have discussed. So you have shared, right? So the 1-1-1-10. Basically, you guys, if you want to launch a new initiative and you are working for a company that sells high ACV product, by high ACV, I mean, like, let's say, starting from 50K. So let's say if you are selling high ACV product and you have long and complex sales cycle, right? So you can't expect deals flow into your pipeline just by running display ads or any kind of ads, driving traffic to landing page, and then sales just passively sitting and getting all of these opportunities and working with them, right? So if you have this challenge, you need to understand that any new initiative should have a specific, let's say, launching process. We usually define 3 stages. So stage number 1 is the pilot campaign, and the pilot campaign stands for 1 SDR, 1 marketer, also 1 geographical market, 1 vertical, and then maximum 10 accounts. You can select more. I mean, obviously it's flexible, right? Like in Jim's case, you can select 20 accounts. But why exactly the lean team? Why exactly only one market and one vertical? And here is the truth. First of all, you need to accept the fact that even if you have the skill set, right? If you have done ABM previously, you build ABM in a new organization that have never done it before, right? So that would be a learning curve. That would be maybe some resistance, or maybe you need to get the buy-in of senior leadership, or maybe buy-in of sales. Again, because it's a team sport, it's not like a siloed operation that is done purely by marketing. You need to have a shared common playbook. So that's really important. And now here is the truth. The more people are involved, the slower is the campaign execution, right? And the harder it would be to get the results. That's why, like you see in this case, it's small scope campaign, it's lean team, and the results are flowing pretty fast. The goal of the pilot campaign is to validate our hypothesis, because we still make hypotheses. Did we select the right market? Did we select the right vertical? Did we make a good ICP, right? Did we make a good list of qualification and disqualification criteria for account list building? Did we select the right accounts? These are still hypotheses. These are still assumptions, and we need to validate them fast. And then we have two more stages: operationalization and the scaling part, right? So to scale ABM or demand generation or any other function, you need to build your in-house playbooks. You don't need to come and say, hey guys, you know, there's a company called fullfunnel.io. They have lots of these case studies, so I believe all our organization should follow these case studies and do it, right? No way it will, you have chances to fly this idea, right, in your organization. So your goal is to build your in-house playbooks. And the faster you'll do it, the faster you can present the results. Like in Jim's case, he can say, hey, this is what I have done. These are the messages or replies I have got. This is how many opportunities I was able to book. These are the results of the program. And this is completely different. Now, other people see the results and they say, yeah, this is exactly that we want to double down more and invest. And suddenly, from an experiment, it becomes like a key initiative or top priority initiative in the organization. It gets support from senior leadership, it gets support from CRO, head of sales, it gets support from CMO, VP of marketing, etc. And company starts rolling out this initiative, right? This is really important. Let me know, guys, if it makes sense. Type plus in the Zoom chat. Or feel free to type any questions.
Yeah. You know, you said a lot there, Andre, and I want to latch onto a couple of things from a mindset perspective that people need to be prepared to encounter. And especially if you're in a sales organization, you know, typical sales organizations focus on just volume as their biggest determinant of what is it that you're actually doing. And actually, if you're thinking about a high performing sales organization, they're going to think about conversions. And the reason why I mention this is, you know, you have 3% of your marketplace that is ready to buy what you have to sell right this second, right? And if you're going out to market as a seller, assuming that 100% of your market is ready to buy now and all of your messaging fits that model, you're going to irritate a lot of people and turn them off, and you're going to end up on a lot of block lists, and you're going to get the results that typically sales organizations get. So the reason why I mentioned mindset and philosophy shift is because you have to shift the focus to converting at every stage of the funnel. My number one priority or my number one concern when I'm actually engaging in my prospect landscape is, how can I drive more conversations and gather more understanding about what that buyer is going through and prioritize who I focus on. So having this narrow focus helps do that. You're being much more targeted, but you're still going to run into those scenarios where people are at different stages of the buying journey, and you as a seller need to account for that, because nobody is going to do anything from a commercial perspective with you until they know, like, and trust you. So how do you build the space for that? And this is what this allows you to do as a seller. It requires a level of patience from sellers, which is an open question on if that exists, but you have to be disciplined and patient and really operate from a position of seeking to understand versus trying to be understood first. So this is where you have that discovery mindset on an ongoing basis to help you kind of move the needle. So I want to switch gears a little bit. So this had results. And these were the results in a very small case that I thought we were on strong footing to kind of advance the ball. It just didn't end up shaking out that way. But the great thing is that my marketing counterpart and I actually built out an 18-month roadmap that mapped out every, basically week, the cadence that we would do and the motions that we would put into place to kind of create a multi-tiered go-to-market approach where we're executing this on a large scale. And the great thing is, once that's built, you have a template in your head that you can take it wherever you want to go. So I took all of this information, and I actually I'm part of the channel partnerships team at Circa. We're a SaaS technology company, and we help customers solve either talent attraction, engagement, or retention issues with a DEI focus. So my role, my current role, was building out or helping to build out our channel partnership ecosystem. So I applied all of the stuff that I normally do, leading with content, and taking all of the stuff that I did previously and applied it in this context. And instead of a 1-1-1-20 model, I had to be even leaner. So it was one marketer and seller, that's me, 4 personas that we're selling into. So we're going to sell into marketing, sales, the C-suite, and product. So these those are all a little bit different in terms of how you do your messaging and all of that sort of stuff. And I initially started out with 40 companies. So bigger in some cases, smaller in others, but more complexity in it. And this is ongoing. And it's been phenomenal in terms of filling the funnel and working those concepts downstream, because the results are, kind of speak for themselves. I'm basically running this over a 2-month period, and it's a core part of my playbook going forward. And I run the same plays, and here are the results that are happening. And these are actually going downstream even faster in terms of revenue realization. But the key thing is, you're approaching your entire audience from a perspective of, hey, I want to understand what you're going through, what you're dealing with. I want to have a conversation and want to understand the market. There's a content collaboration play that's incorporated into it. So there's a bunch of different things that you can do in terms of your messaging, but it all works because you're not going in with the slippery salesperson approach. So this gives you a little bit of an idea of what the tech stack looks like. This is nothing crazy. Basic stuff. You could probably pull this off with a free CRM, an email provider, and LinkedIn. And actually, I use a multi-channel outreach approach to maximize the touches that I have on a single prospect to kind of accelerate them down funnel. And we'll get into that in just a second, but there's nothing extraordinary here.
What did you use as a sales intel?
So sales intel is similar to Zoom Info. So it'll give you the data enrichment of the prospects that you're calling. So if you need direct dials and emails and all that sort of stuff, sales intel was the specific tool that does the same thing as Zoom Info or discover.org. There's plenty of stuff out there that does that. But even if you don't have something like that, if you're leading with a content-led play and you're limited to just doing LinkedIn and Sales Navigator without that direct enrichment of that info, you can still make a lot of runway. And actually, LinkedIn and Sales Navigator is sort of, I could execute this with a CRM, an email, and LinkedIn and be just fine. So you could be super lean in a resource thin environment and still get these results if you're doing things the right way, if you're not pit slapping every prospect in your ecosystem.
And that's really important. Again, this is going and this is aligned with the philosophy of the pilot campaign, right? So I told we need to have a lean team, and at the same time we need to have a lean stack, and ideally rely upon what you have already in your stack, right? You can potentially add something that is I mean, it's not me, ZoomInfo has this feature, but let's say you can add one source of intent data. Let's say you can install any software that reveals website traffic and shows the domains that are visiting high intent website pages, and you can use these accounts, right, and add them to your target account list. And that's it. CRM and LinkedIn Sales Navigator, that's enough. And probably it might be a surprise for some of you, you don't see any big ABM vendors name in that list, and you don't need them. And I would say it's just quite often I have heard about the ABM setup when companies say, okay, so let's build a list of thousands of accounts and let's cover these accounts with display ads, and sales will do this traditional outreach. Now the question to you, if you want to do ABM properly, right? Qualify the accounts, do the account research to extract the key initiatives of these accounts, enrich the buying committee, understand the needs of the buying committee, the reasons to purchase or not purchase your product, right? It takes a lot of time. Now the question to you guys, how many SDRs and marketers do you guys think you need to have in your organization to target and prospect even 100 contacts, even 100 accounts? Let's assume that you are selling to mid-size or enterprise accounts. Let me know your assumptions in the chat. How many SDRs or marketers do you need to have?
I have an answer on that.
Yeah, so I would be honest, Zhenya, with you. I don't think that you will be able, that one person can do it for 100 accounts, considering the fact that you will have at least 4 buying committee members, you'll need to go through 400 contacts. And I honestly doubt that one person will be able to do the appropriate ABM.
So do you want me to throw something out there that's gonna maybe turn that theory sideways? Because like in this current role, I'm playing the role of SDR and account executive and marketer. So I actually, when I identified those 40 accounts and 4 personas across those accounts that I wanted to reach into, I'm doing all the research. I'm doing all of the identification and filtering of those accounts to see. So what I did is I actually prioritized contacts that were active on LinkedIn as my highest priority targets in my prospect map. So it can be done. If you want to do it faster, you probably need some additional resources to take the load off, but you can pull it off if you're talking about a really small sales team. And the thing with my current role is that even though we have a large sales team, our indirect team is pretty immature. So I was brought in to bring in a lot of new relationships using this approach. So a lot of the research, a lot of the account qualification, a lot of the persona qualification, actually all of it sat with me. So it kind of, you have to be very organized in terms of how you structure your days, but it still can be done with one person.
Yeah, but again, it's leading us to the volume, right? So if you have the, let's say, short time frame and you want to run appropriate ABM campaign, so for let's say for even 100 contacts, you will need to have at least 2 SDRs, so to split the accounts. And it's, let's say, they will be dedicated to the process. They just don't dedicate, I don't know, 30 minutes per day to do it, right?
Yeah.
That's not possible. But now scale it to 1,000 accounts, right? So how many SDRs do you need to have? And I'm saying again, to do the appropriate account research, to analyze the press releases, to analyze all the publicly available information about key initiatives, etc. Right? So this way I'm leading to that it's absolutely not possible to do the one-to-many campaign in an appropriate way. So that's why you don't see any ABM vendors in that list, right? And that's why we are promoting, or let's say evangelizing the stuff that you need to have a good ICP and a good qualification and disqualification criteria. So sales and marketing maximize their chances of building a list of accounts that have a need in, or might have a need in your product, and there is a high probability they have this need, right? So that's the point.
Yeah, no, it can be, just because it can be done doesn't mean you should do it. So I mean, mine is a small case scenario, an example, but you're absolutely right, is that if you want to really accelerate results once you've actually got done through your test case or validation of your hypothesis, you're definitely going to need some feet on the street to kind of execute and focus in on the different activities. But you mentioned something, Andre, that I think it's super important. And this is where some of these efforts really fall apart, is that there isn't a steady stream of communication between sales and marketing when it comes to how do you execute, what are the results, how do we need to change it. That needs to be sort of a key cycle element of what the conversation looks like, because we're you're validating a theory or a hypothesis. How are you going to adjust based on new information unless you're creating that feedback loop to constantly iterate and move forward? So I think that's absolutely critical when you're doing this sort of outreach. I think the challenge that a lot of selling organizations are going to have is shifting away from the conversation that is direct product focused, because most selling organizations are going to do their outreach based on, hey, we do X, Y, and Z. We thought you might be interested. Do you want to meet with us? And if you're taking that approach, that is a product-centric approach versus a buyer-centric or problem-centric approach. And that's where you're going to run into problems as far as being able to execute this, because when you're using a content play, a market research play, it's not about your product. It's not about your process. It's not about your service. It's about understanding the buyer world and using that information to shape kind of how you move forward within that account. So that's a good, sort of component to talk about. Looks like Xenia had a question in the chat. Do you have any examples of non-product direct reach out? Do you want me to handle that now, or should we wait? What do you think, Andre?
I think let's finish the model so it will make sense, and then we can share practical examples.
Okay, sounds good. Oh, got some good questions coming in, so I'm pretty excited about that. So outreach model is pretty simple, and I touched on this earlier in the conversation, is I use a triple tap approach. So if I'm reaching out to Andre, and Andre is one of my personas that I want to connect with, generally speaking, every outreach from me, he's going to see three hits. So I'm going to give him a call. My number pops up. I'm going to send him an email. It's going to reference the call. And then I'm going to send him a LinkedIn message, and it's all going to be integrated and create this feedback loop where I'm constantly hitting him up across these three channels. Excuse me. Across these three channels. And the messaging is going to be fairly similar. And it's going to be problem focused. And the call to action is a soft call to action, which is, is this worth a conversation? Versus, hey, schedule 15 minutes on my calendar and throw the Calendly link. So that's again where sellers are going to need to be pretty disciplined in testing out what they think is the problem that buyer is dealing with. So again, nothing revolutionary here. No extensive tech stack investment or whatever that you need to do with this. This is pretty grassroots efforts in terms of your outreach. Then again, I touched on this earlier. These are the personas that I target. In the first example or use case that I cited, we were selling into HR. In this role, in this indirect selling role, my buying committee is in sales, marketing, and product typically. And I need to engage at the VP level or higher and the C-suite to bring everybody together to understand what the stakeholder or buying committee landscape looks like. So I have different approaches based on the level that I'm reaching out to that gets them involved in a conversation. And we can talk about some of the questions that are popping up from a market research perspective or content play a little bit later on. But these are the personas. And I think one of the things, and honestly, like, this is where it gets interesting, because if you're dealing with multiple personas and I'm really good in selling into the HR persona, the sales persona, and the marketing persona. I know those spaces well because I play in all three of them. I don't know product well. So if you have some gaps in terms of your persona knowledge, this is where you can actually use a market research play to build out your persona and understand their buying journey, and then build on the fly in terms of what your messaging should look like. And then, you take a look at all of this stuff that I've done here, the response rates so far. Typically in my outreach, I'm getting, these are cold emails. So these people don't know me. Anywhere from 40 to 50% in terms of opens. I don't put anything that you can click on into the email just to make sure that it gets deliverable. But my open rates or response rates are anywhere from 5 to 8%. So that's pretty solid. When I call, so I'm using that triple tap approach. So my sequencing is usually email, LinkedIn, and call. And usually by the time I call, when I get pickups, I can convert those at a fairly high rate. And again, these are cold. And then on LinkedIn, the conversions are what they are. And again, LinkedIn is a process in and of itself. And the next part of what we're going to talk about is, how does this model work? Like we talked about, hey, these are the things that are coming out of it. Here's how, my process map looked. And it's similar to some of the stuff that, if you've been following Full Funnel, it's the stuff that, Vlad and Andre have been talking about for a while. You want to start with your prospect list. You want to engage them before you send them the connection request. So I'm always engaging with my personas in the comments first. So you're building that relationship first before sending that connection request. So I have this a little bit backwards. From a warm-up perspective, through that conversation, I'm opening the door to ask questions about specific problems that they have. And I'm moving across these different stages based on the feedback that I'm getting from that potential buyer. And when they hit, or we have a series of conversations about a specific problem, that's when I move them into that conversation stage, and that just moves them through the sales cycle. So this is how do you identify, warm up, and engage, warm up, and activate your prospect. And then once those are activated, how do you move them through the selling funnel? And this actually can go both directions. So this just gives you a decent map of how that works. So this is the top of the funnel stuff, and then it works it to mid funnel. But when you're looking at how do you create sort of this flywheel, this maps it out in terms of how can you do your outreach using various trigger events or whatever to engage with those prospects. So you have your personas that you're targeting. There's some sort of trigger event. It could be a new person that takes on a role. You could see a lot of hiring that happens within a company. That could be a trigger event. It could be layoffs. It could be new funding that they've gotten. Any number of things could be a trigger event. You're going to go to that contact list, reach out to them across all of the channels that you typically reach out. Based on their response, it's going to inform what you need to do. And then you just follow the map. I mean, this is basically a process flow. Once you connect with them and you ask them a question about, hey, would you have interest in attending this, webinar, or potentially being featured on a panel or whatever. Based on that response, you're going to move through that process. And what this is doing is that it's allowing two things from the selling side. It's allowing you to build a frictionless relationship with that person. It's allowing you to learn about that person on an ongoing basis and the organization on an ongoing basis. And it's going to allow you to investigate, hey, what is the current state of that organization, and is where they're at in their buyer journey relevant to what we solve from a customer basis? So, Andre, should I go to that next slide and cover this as well, or should we break here for some questions or input?
One quick question that's coming from Ishan. So did you email all the buying committee members?
No, I don't email all of them at once. And when I look at, I mean, if you're dealing with one persona, then obviously the people that you've identified, you're gonna message. So if I'm dealing with one persona, I might deal with VPs and C-suite within that persona. So let's say it's HR. I will have a slightly different message for an HR persona, a VP persona versus an executive persona. On an executive persona, my message is going to be much more strategic in terms of, hey, how are you handling this problem? I've noticed X at your organization. That typically means Y. I'm assuming that you know some things about how to solve Y. Y is the problem. Would you be interested in having a conversation so I can build out a case study on what you're doing in terms of best practices? So that's at the executive level. At the VP level, it's going to be a combination of strategic and tactical in terms of what my messaging is. But I'm not messaging them at the same time, and I'm certainly not messaging them with the same message because it's slightly different in terms of what's going to be important to them. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would say, I think one of the things that you need to be really careful about is using generic messages, and especially from a selling perspective, you know, the things that a C-level executive cares about versus a VP versus a director are going to be all different. So you need to make sure that you're dicing up your personas and levels accordingly with the appropriate messages so that each message you're sending is relevant to them. And I'm not a big volume person. I tend to personalize a lot of my outreach, so that actually, you know, creates a smaller pool as well, because you can't, you know, have hyper personalized messaging for 1,000 people without having some significant resources behind it. But anyways, when you look at this model, the net thing, the key thing that people should take away from this model is that it, as a seller, it gives you a mechanism to be constantly engaging with your prospect and really understanding where they're at and creating an ongoing conversation. This is the same model that I apply on LinkedIn, and you can do this through your emails as well. I'm always making people in my network and in my prospect list aware of different content pieces that are going to be interesting to them, and then based on their response, it gives me an opportunity to engage. If they attend, it gives me a feedback loop to learn more and potentially identify some opportunities to move forward. So the last thing from a model perspective that I want to talk through, and this is just an extension of what you see. So when you look at this creates a flywheel, but this is how you actually extend that flywheel. When you have that conversation with that buyer about their feedback about whatever you were talking about or whatever they attended, you're going to gather that insight and store it back for some later use. And then when there's a trigger event that's relevant to that buyer, you can actually pull that information out of your CRM and then target them based on that specific trigger event and get a conversation started about, hey, what's the impact of this particular event on you at the desk level? And this creates an opportunity for you to introduce some solution that you might have to offer. Now, think about it this way. If you hadn't done the legwork ahead of time to build that relationship, you would never create the space to have that sort of question. So this is where it becomes critical, where you're opening with trying to understand your buyer first as a seller and creating that relationship before, you know, much further down the road where a trigger is leveraged to prompt a response. So that's kind of the model and the execution. I could probably talk about this stuff for hours, but it'd probably be boring for everybody.
First of all, thanks a lot for preparing and sharing the entire workflow. I think that is a really good one, and it's valuable for folks. We have a couple of questions, and I would love to bring folks, but before we'll start, one question that is pumping in my head. So you are in sales, right? And you had this motivation to dive deeply and just implement all of that stuff. But let's zoom out. Let's assume that you have a skilled marketer in your organization, right? And sales is basically is driven by sales-led motion. They do conventional, traditional stuff, right? But marketers want to build ABM. Let's say this marketer wants to build an ABM motion, and they come to you. So this, I believe, a very practical question to hear your point of view from being on the sales side. How marketer should present the program to you to get your buy-in and support and basically motivate you to collaborate?
You know, that is a great question. And it takes me back to kind of what I obsess about. As a seller, if you're a seller that is not obsessed about how do I get in front of more people, you're probably in the wrong function, because that needs to be the singular obsession that every salesperson has. How do I get in front of more people and have more meaningful conversations? So if I'm a marketer trying to present this to sales and get their mind shifted in a way that's meaningful for sales, the question that I would ask to a marketer is, hey, Andre, or to a seller, hey, Andre, you know, I'm curious, what's the biggest problem that you're dealing with as a seller? And Andre's probably going to say, well, I can't get enough people to respond to me or have conversations with me. Then as a marketer, I would ask the question, what if I could point or draw you a map or a process that would allow you to probably get in front of 70 or 80% of your target market and have at least a relationship building conversation with them? What would be the impact on that to your business? And then just shut up as a marketer. Like, that is the question, because any seller worth their salt, they're going to respond back, well, what do you mean I'm going to be able to get in front of 70 or 80% of everybody that I'm trying to get in front of and have a meaningful conversation? How would you do that? And now you've opened the door. You've opened the door, but you need to ask, well, what are you doing now? So it's the same thing that sellers do in terms of understanding their current process and diagnosing or uncovering the current pain with a buyer. You have to do that with a seller if you're internally trying to get this motion working. Have them, you know, dig into what are they doing and what are the results. I mean, like, that's essentially, like, I asked myself that question when I first, you know, discovered full funnel. Is I need to get in front of more people. I can't send out 16,000 emails or points of contact and deal with the same thing. Doing more of the same crappy activity and crappy messaging isn't going to get different results. So I need to have different motions to allow me to get in front of people. So how do I solve for that? Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. And I believe lots of B2B marketers are dealing with this issue, right? So it was fantastic to ask and get real perspective. So we have a couple of questions from Jordan and from Ishan. So Jordan, let me print you in. So just a second, if you can jump in and unmute yourself.
Hi. Yeah, I just had a question. So it's kind of related to just one client that I'm working with now. We kind of have the base assumptions for what the ideal persona would, you know, be facing in regards to challenges. But we've been running like cold email outreach, and I've recently started doing the follow-up outreach on phone calls as well. And we've seen conversions there, but not near enough that we should have, I think. And I'm kind of at a loss because it's like, it's quite it's quite straightforward that these assumptions are what they would be facing, but we're just like not seeing the conversions on it. And I just don't know if you have any take on maybe a different path.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jordan. And I'd probably need to dig in a little bit deeper to give you a definite answer.
Yeah,
but I think so. I dropped my LinkedIn connection in the chat, so feel free to connect, and happy to have a conversation with anybody that's kind of navigating that. But there's a couple of things that I'm going to ask questions on to your specific problem.
Yeah.
When you built out the challenges or define the challenges that this particular persona is dealing with, how did you actually build out those challenges, or where did you get the information on to build that challenge question? Was it through customer interviews or just a hypothesis that you built?
So it's for one of my clients. So I basically spoke to their successful clients that they have signed, and just through talking to him and his co-founder, and we built out multiple case studies and kind of went off that. And I think we've tried, we know which industries have converted the best for us now, but we're just not getting the right messaging, I think.
So this might help on the cold phone outreach if you're doing that. So
I've started.
So if you're doing cold phone outreach, this is going to be a different way to do an outreach and get at least a reply, because that's the big thing that you want to focus on. So instead of saying, hey, we've noticed from other clients of ours or other leaders similar to you, they're dealing with these 3 problems. Typical outreach is, hey, which one of these is relevant to you? Or some version of that is typically what a cold phone outreach looks like. You might want to pivot that, because people will never admit that they're doing something wrong, but they're more than happy to correct you if you're wrong on something. So instead of your outreach being, hey, I've noticed that, folks at your level typically deal with 1, 2, and 3 as challenges, which one is most relevant to you? You can say, hey, I've done some research based on what I see on LinkedIn. I know that sales organizations typically deal with problems 1, 2, and 3. It doesn't look like you're dealing with any of that. I'd be curious to get your insight on how you've solved for that. So asking that question, assuming that they don't have problems with the thing that you think they have problems with, will actually get them to open up so this is very tactical. This will actually get them talking more. So you may want to try that pivot, but certainly, Jordan, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I can take a look at what your outbound email looks like, because there may be a problem there too that I'm not capturing, and we don't want to overdiagnose without really knowing like what's going on. It's a great question.
Yeah, thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you. Guys, if you have any other questions, feel free to jump in, and you can type your questions in the Zoom chat or just raise your hand. I will call you. So Jim also dropped a link to his profile, so you can reach out and connect to him. Maybe one quick question from my side. How did you like this episode? Was it good? Was it insightful? Type any kind of emoji or type plus in the Zoom chat, sharing your feedback. Curious to hear.
I liked it. Don't be afraid to hurt my feelings though if you thought it sucked. There was a question, Andre, and I don't know if we addressed it earlier, and I think it was Ishan who asked, what's a market research play? I saw you drop a link, but I didn't actually check the link. Does the link address his question?
I actually shared with him the market research play that we use, and it's a detailed case study. I saw that it would be good just for him to get like a detailed overview of the process to see it in action, right?
Yep. So the other thing where you can use a market research play is actually actually all of it is to test out a hypothesis that you have. But if you're dealing with a persona that you haven't, had, this is what I'm doing with the product marketing side in my outreach is I want to understand what do product marketers care about when or product development teams care about when it comes to their roles and what they look at from a roadmap perspective. So I run sort of a market research interview to that particular persona to help me kind of figure out, okay, what does my downstream messaging need to look like for that group? I think Xenia had a question earlier, and hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Xenia, about what does a non-product direct outreach look like? So I'll field that right now. Non-product direct outreach is really, oh, hey, Xenia. You're on mute. So if you want to hop on and ask the question, then we can have some problem solving. And I'm a big fan of your scenery over mine. So where are you at right now?
In Mexico right now. So I came to work from here today to kind of change my environment for a little bit.
Well, I'll be happy to trade working out of Mexico in the sun versus Milwaukee in the cold.
And I have my dogs here with me too, begging for food around.
All right, now you're just being mean and just rubbing it in.
Just showing up. Yeah, no.
No, that's a great question. Do you have any clarification that you feel is important for me to know before I tackle the answer?
Yeah. So the reason I'm asking is that we have in our team 5 salespeople and 1 SDR, and they're usually extremely willing to work and collaborate, but they don't know. It feels like the brain is not wired to ask these questions that are not product specific. So the response that I have is like, we're willing to help, write us a script or teach us how to approach this. So having some successful examples of like, even if they can relate to them 100%, but just to see the pattern, kind of like what you explained about technical things, like, okay, assume what they have problem with and flipped it and start the conversation, having some kind of wireframe will really help them.
No, that's thanks for that clarification. That's helpful. So one of the exercises that I typically do when I'm dealing with or when I have a sales team and I'm trying to shift them away from a product driven conversation is think about the problems that your product solves. Like, so I work for a SaaS company. I sell into HR. And HR deals with 2 critical problems. They can't find enough people to fill the roles that they have open, and they can't keep the people that they have inside their organizations and retain them. So both of those problems have significant cost implications, right? So if you have a bunch of open roles, there's a bunch of downstream staffing impact. If you can't keep the people that you have, you're burning money. Our solution solves those things, but it solves them from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective. So in your environment, and if you're a product organization, what is the problem that your product is solving for the customer? And that's how you shift into what is the problem that we solve? What's the implication of that problem? How does that impact that person at the desk? If that problem isn't solved, what is the cost associated with that problem existing? And that shifts how you actually communicate. So for example, if I'm reaching out to you, and we'll just talk about like the problems that Circus solves, instead of saying, hey, would you be interested in getting more candidates for your roles? You're going to be like, who the hell are you? Where are you calling from? No, not interested. Where if I shift it and say, hey, Xenia, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right. Hey, Xenia, typically when I'm talking to talent acquisition leaders, they are dealing with significant issues in finding diverse talent for their organizations. I've noticed based on your growth, you're probably not dealing with that. Am I accurate? I'm creating a conversation based on the problem versus the product. So you ask, you make a couple of assumptions and then you ask the question that is problem focused, and that opens you up from an SDR perspective to have a more open conversation. Does that help? You're on mute.
Yes, that helps. Follow-up question: how do you transition them to the product for them to be very smooth? Because I've seen really bad transitions right now when people try to reach out to me on LinkedIn. It starts very nice, and then it's always end. Do you have 15 minutes for a call? And you're like, oh man.
Yeah, samesies. Hashtag samesies. I have that happening all the time on LinkedIn as well. So this is where there needs to be a mindset shift from a seller's perspective. Your number one priority as a seller should be to understand the buyer and where they're at in their journey first. So you're just gathering information. you're not going to get happy ears. And what happy ears is hearing the one answer that you're looking for and then moving directly into a product conversation, because that doesn't work. And that's what's typical within selling organizations. So if you're looking at how do you pivot, my recommendation is to keep those conversations separate. If you're opening with curiosity and, hey, you ask a question, customer gives an answer, or prospect gives an answer, that answer has an adjective in it. You're going to ask them, well, you mentioned that this was frustrating. Tell me a little bit more about how it's frustrating. Why is it frustrating? What's the impact of that frustration? And you gather all that info and you let it sit. So you have to be willing and disciplined to walk away from that conversation and let it sit, and then come back and say, this is where Full Funnel does a great job with content hubs and things like that. You can set up, use Paperflight to set up a content hub. And after you gather that info from your prospect and say, hey, Xenia, I was thinking about our conversation, and I created a content hub for you. I put a couple of resources in there that I think might be helpful. Take a look at it and let me know what you think. And you send them that link, you wait for the trigger event for them to check that out. And then as a set SDR, once you hit that trigger, that is once they engage with that, that's your trigger as an SDR to go back out. Hey, I wanted to follow up on our conversation. Was the stuff that I sent you helpful? What did you take away from it? What would be the impact if we were able to potentially present some solutions for you that help solve this problem? Now you're in a different conversation, and you're not like, being slippery, just opening with what's important to you. You're trying to help solve and being a consultant. So that's how you make that pivot when you're talking about that particular motion.
Yeah, and even you can personalize this outreach, so you can make it more specific. Just let's say saying, if I know that you consumed, I put different pieces of content, right? And you have checked, let's say, a piece about ABM stack, I can reach out and say, so any questions I building, or I could make it. I'm not saying that, hey, I knew that you checked this post, right? I was spying on you, but I'm saying that I am building your ABM stack now and evaluating different software. If you want, we can have a chat and I can help you to figure out what software might make sense to your business case, right? And then we have a fantastic opportunity. No, we don't sell in the Content Hub. The Content Hub is the dedicated place to nurture a specific account, right? And treat it as an opportunity for progressive profiling and spotting on the interests of specific person, right? So guys, that being said, I dropped a link to our Trenches community. Jim as well is one of the earliest members of our Trenches community, so you can join us and you can also ask questions in channels or reach him out in a Slack channel. So unfortunately, I have hard stop and need to jump to another call. And first of all, thank you all for coming and asking great questions. And Jim, obviously, thank you so much for creating this workflow and sharing all the results and your processes. Thank you all, guys. And next Thursday, we have episode number 100, huge milestone, and we're going to share all lessons we have learned so far in 2022 and the state of full funnel marketing, something that you can bring for 2023 planning. So hopefully to see you next Thursday. Take care. Cheers.